We're continuing the fundamentals. This is the second video. We're going to talk about the difference between observational studies and experiments. And we're going to begin talking about sampling. The first two types would be voluntary and convenient sampling. Let's begin talking about what an observational study is. In an observational study, or observational studies, quantifies observations and or measures variables, but does not attempt to influence the response, which is different than an experiment. In an experiment, the experimenter deliberately imposes some treatment. Treatment's a very sort of general term used for, whatever is done on the individuals. Selected by using a predetermined experimental procedure, right, which we talked earlier about, should probably have some form of randomization in there, in order to observe their response. So the real difference between observational study and experiment is this deliberately imposed treatment on, some individuals. Again, could be humans. We could talk about a physics experiment if we really wanted to. But since this statistics is often used for human systems, let's use the following example. So this is kind of exciting. I finally figured out how to type in this program, which I'm sure you're more excited than I am, because now you don't have to try and read my handwriting. So, here's an example. The question is, are job training programs effective in helping transition people out of the welfare system? If so, should such programs be made mandatory for all welfare participants? So, welfare participants who have chosen to participate in a job training program are identified, and it's found that 87% successfully transitioned out of the welfare system. That seems like a pretty good percentage. The question is this an observational study or an experiment? Answering this question really comes down to, is there a treatment? And there is. There is a treatment. That's the job training program. Now, it's not just that there is a treatment, but how is that treatment applied? Is that treatment being imposed on individuals? Why, yes, it is. All right, it's starting to look kind of like an experiment. But who is selecting which individuals will receive the treatment? The experimenter? No, actually, that's not the case. The individual is self-selecting. That means it's not an experiment, it's an observational study. So great, we've identified. It's an observational study. Observational studies are great. We can get lots of good information from observational studies. Let's go back to the question, right, is, should everyone be made to go through a job training program? Is it going to be effective in moving everybody, or most people, maybe 87% of everybody who's in the welfare system, out of the system? Can we answer the original question? Are job training programs effective in transitioning people out of the welfare system? The short answer is no, but we have to be careful. I'm not answering this question. I'm not saying that the job training programs aren't effective. I'm saying no, we can't answer the question. It may be perfectly effective. We just can't answer that question. And here's the reason why. Because the individual is self-selected, there could be lurking or confounding variables. For example, the people who voluntarily chose to participate in these job training programs, maybe they would have actually transitioned out of the welfare system anyways because of, issues of motivation or situation or education or all kinds of variables that exist. This self-selecting group may not be representative of the whole population of people participating in the welfare system. There are really only two ways I think we could go about answering this question. Use a proper experiment, which we have not really talked about and is going to be a subject for a later video, or I suppose we could make it mandatory for everybody and then conduct another observational study afterwards to evaluate its effectiveness. The problem with this is it is expensive, right? Not to mention, we're implementing a policy we don't necessarily know is effective, right? And we're doing this to people. We don't want to act arbitrarily with people, which gets back to ethics. Right? We need to treat people reasonably and fairly. Maybe let's talk about this experiment a little bit more. We will go into more details, but I should give you at least some idea of what it would be like. If we were going to do a proper experiment for this welfare job training program, what we could do is randomly select individuals from all of the welfare participants, have them go through job training program, and say there's a 82% rate at which people from that group moves out of the welfare system, then that might be actually representative of the whole population, and we might be able to talk about the effectiveness of the program. The question then transfers to, well, is 82% high enough? Is that effective or not effective? That's a little bit more of a policy discussion. The math kind of ends at that point. The kind of questions we're going to figure out later on is, well, how do we randomly select individuals? And if we have a huge population, like an entire country that we want to survey or do something with, are there ways that we can ensure good representation? And so that's what we'll talk about in the later video. And that actually leads us nicely into our next topic of sampling. Now, sampling is a really big topic, actually, and there's a number of different methods. And what I'm going to do is kind of spread them out so that you don't have to drink from the fire hose all at once. So, first of all, we can talk about a census, right? Which is, in fact, not sampling, because it includes every member of a population. So, taking a census can be difficult when the population is large. If we wanted to take a census of the 11th grade, we could probably do that. Taking census of the entire country, a lot more difficult, which is when we take a sample, which is only a portion of a population. Like I said, there's different ways of sampling. We'll go over two of them right now: voluntary sampling and convenience sampling. We already have an example of voluntary sampling. That's the welfare participants who voluntarily chose to participate in the job training programs. We've already talked about some of the problems that volunteer sampling can produce. There can be lurking and confounding variables. Now, convenience sampling, individuals are selected for the convenience of the researcher. This is the classic example, are the mall surveys. You've seen those. People with clipboards standing in the malls, asking you questions about whatever, anything. Well, that's actually a very convenient form of data collection for the researcher. But again, both of these can have lurking and confounding variables. Well, do people who go to the malls, we can start talking about socioeconomic status again? Are there variables which makes those people not representative necessarily of the population entirely? So these two methods of sampling are generally kind of looked down upon. And in particular, you have to be careful about the conclusions that can be drawn. If the conclusions are from a mall survey, and 50% of those surveyed, were buying, kitchenware, well then that statistic only applies to the population survey. We've kind of created a new population of mall goers. So it can only be applied to people who go to the mall. Again, what I said earlier, to overcome these limitations of working and confounding variables, the solution which is most effective is randomizing. And so when we talk about the other sampling methods, we're going to figure out how to randomize, methods of randomization that should try to, again, you can't eliminate working and confounding variables, but we can try and spread them out so that they're consistent across the sample. Because how do you know what you don't know? How can you see what you haven't seen? Right? Can you ever be sure you don't have working or confounding variables? No, you can never be sure. So we use randomization to try and spread out whatever working variables or confounding variables may exist.